Hi there, and welcome to the Spreadsheet Life Excel Drop-down List Masterclass. In this video, I will be teaching you everything that you need to know about creating a drop-down list in Microsoft Excel. Also, you can find a link to download the practice file in the description below. Okie dokie, let's take a look at what you will be learning. Starting off, I will cover how to create a simple drop-down list with just a few options. And next, I'll cover how to create a drop-down list that pulls its options from a range of cells within your workbook. And after that, I'll show you how to create a dynamic drop-down list that you can add options to after you've created the list. And from there, I'll go over how to create a dependent drop-down list that changes its options depending on the selection from another list. And finally, I'll show you how you can create a drop-down list that filters out any options that you've already used. That way, you can ensure that each list item is only entered one time. Okie dokie, if you're ready to start learning about drop-down lists in Excel, then let's get to it. We will begin with learning how to create a simple drop-down list in Excel that allows you to pick from just a few options. Here, we have a list of tasks and then a status column where we can see the status of each task. The goal is to create a drop-down menu so that the user can select one of these three statuses like so. Now to create that drop-down list, start by selecting all of the cells where you want the menu to be. Next, go to Data and then Data Validation, and in the dialog box that appears, select the list option under Allow. This will allow you to create a drop-down menu. Now where it says Source, you can simply type in the options that you want to be in the drop-down menu. The only thing is that you have to separate each individual list item with a comma. So to add in the three status indicators, go ahead and type in To Do, and then a comma, and then In Progress, and then a comma, and finally type in Done. After that, you can go ahead and click on OK. And now you have a drop-down menu that you can use to select the status for each individual task in your list. Also, if you ever want to get rid of the drop-down menu feature, just select the range of cells, go to Data, Data Validation, and select the Clear All option, and then click on OK. And now the drop-down menu has been removed. Okie dokie, let's move on to our second topic. For our second topic, I will show you how to create a drop-down list that contains options that have already been entered into your spreadsheet. As you can see here, we have the same task list as before, but the goal this time is to create a drop-down list that pulls its options from the status options we have listed right here. So to do that, begin by selecting the range where you want your drop-down menus to be, and then go to Data and Data Validation. Just like before, select the List option under Allow. And for the source, instead of typing in the values one by one, go ahead and select the range containing the list items that you want to add to the drop-down list. Then from here, you can click on OK. Now you have a drop-down menu that allows you to pick from one of the four options you see listed here in the worksheet. Plus, if you happen to change one of the status list options in the worksheet, then any changes that you make will show up in the drop-down menu automatically. And that is the big advantage to creating your drop-down list by selecting a range rather than typing in the values manually. Okie dokie, at this point, let's move on to our third Masterclass topic. Here you can see that we have a list of books and authors. And let's say that you want to create a drop-down menu for the author column that pulls from the authors that you have listed in your spreadsheet. The only problem is that when you add new books to the list, you might also have new authors to add to the list as well. So you need to create a drop-down list that is dynamic. In other words, you want to create a drop-down menu that can expand to include the new list items, or authors in this case, that are added to your list. So let's take a look at how you can create this dynamic drop-down list. Your very first step is to select the current list of options, which is the author list in this case, and then turn this list into an Excel table. You can do this by going to Insert, Table, or you can use the keyboard shortcut Control-T. And once you do, if your list has a heading like this one does here, then leave this box checked and then click on OK. Your list is now an Excel table. At this point, your next step is to create a range name that references the Excel table. A range name is simply a name that you give to a specified range of cells within your Excel workbook. So to create the range name, start by selecting all of the cells in your Excel table below the table header. Then, in the name box near the top left-hand corner of your worksheet, enter in a name to describe your list. Keep in mind that the range name may not contain any spaces. And once you've entered in your range name, go ahead and press the Enter key on your keyboard. Your range name has now been created, and you can see it by clicking the down arrow next to the name box. Okie dokie. From here, the next step is to select the cells where you want your drop-down list to be. Then, go to Data, Data Validation, and under Allow, change the option to List. Now for the source, you will type in equals, and then the range name that you just created. You can then click on OK. And now you have a drop-down list for the cells in the author column. On top of that, you can add a new author to your list simply by expanding the table, and then by adding that author to the list. And you can expand and add to the table as much as you want. And the best part is that the drop-down menu that you created in the author column expands automatically to include any new authors added to the list. And that is how to make your drop-down list dynamic in Microsoft Excel. Okie dokie, let's move on to topic number 4, how to create a dependent drop-down list in Excel. Now what do I mean by dependent drop-down list? Let me show you an example. Here I have a list of car makes and models. For the car make, there is already a drop-down list in place with the possible make options to pick from. The goal this time is to create a drop-down list for the car models column that changes depending on the selected car make. For instance, if I select Tesla for the make, I only want to see Tesla models available in the drop-down menu for the corresponding cell. In essence, the models drop-down menu is dependent upon the selection of the make. So how do you actually create this sort of drop-down list? The first thing that you need to do is list the sub-options in separate columns within your spreadsheet like so. For example, here I've got the Ford models, the Honda models, and the Tesla models all listed in different columns. And from here, you want to create a range name for each set of sub-options. And it is very important to make each range name exactly the same as one of the choices from the first drop-down list. For instance, the range names need to be Ford, Honda, and Tesla. So for the Ford models, I select all of the options, and then type Ford into the name box to create the first range name. After that, repeat the process for the other two sets of sub-options. Select all of the Honda models and create the range name of Honda for these cells. And then select the Tesla models and create the range name of Tesla for these cells as well. At this point, go ahead and select the cells where you want the drop-down menu to be, and then go to Data and then Data Validation. Select the list option for Allow, and for the source, enter an equals, and then the indirect function. The indirect function takes text and turns that text into a cell reference or range name. So, inside of the indirect function, select the first cell in the make column. In other words, you want to select the first cell in the column that contains the values that this drop-down list will depend on. Now you can see here that once you select the cell, a reference with dollar signs is entered automatically. These dollar signs make this an absolute reference, or in other words, a reference that will not change. You don't want the dollar sign in front of the row number though, so you can go ahead and get rid of it. And that's because you want the row number to change for each cell in our range. For example, you want cell C5 to depend on the value in B5, and you want cell C6 to depend on the value in B6. You don't want the column letter to change, but you do want the row number to change. So you get rid of the dollar sign in front of the row number, and after that you can add a closing parentheses, and then you can click on OK. And now for the first row, you can see that only Ford models show up in the drop-down list because Ford is the selected make. And in the second row, you see only Honda models. And in the third row, you see only Tesla models. And that is because the indirect function that you entered for the data validation takes the first selected value, transforms it into a range name reference that you created earlier, and then that reference is used to power the drop-down menu to give you the proper list of items. If you are still confused, try going back and watching this section one more time. This is something where watching a few times can really help. That being said, let's move on to our final topic of this masterclass. For our last topic, I will show you how to create a drop-down list that removes any items that have already been used once. In this example, we have a list of regions and a list of sales agents. The goal is to create a drop-down menu for the assigned agent column that allows each sales agent to be assigned to a specific region. The catch is that each sales agent may only be assigned to one region. They may not be assigned to multiple regions. In other words, each sales agent may only be entered once. So how do you do this? The first thing that you need to do is create a list of all of the agents that are still available, or in other words, a list of agents that have yet to be assigned to a region. To create this list, you will have to use the filter function. Now the filter function is only available for Office 365 subscribers or Excel 2021 or newer. So if you are working in an older version of Excel, this method will not work for you, unfortunately. That being said, go ahead and select the cell where you want your filtered list to begin, and then enter the formula equals filter function and select the list of sales agents. Now for the second argument, enter the COUNTIF function. For the first argument of the COUNTIF function, select the range where you will be assigning the sales agents. Then, for the second argument of the COUNTIF function, select the list of sales agents once again. You can then close parentheses and then add a less than symbol and then add a 1. Finally, close parentheses and hit enter. You then get back a list of only those sales agents that have yet to be assigned. Now, if you are curious how the formula works, the COUNTIF function returns an array of numbers that represent how many times each sales agent has been assigned. This array is compared to less than 1, which results in an array of true-false values. Finally, the filter function uses the true-false values to return a list of sales agents that have yet to be assigned. Okay, going back to the data validation, go ahead and select the cells where you want your drop-down list to be, and then go to Data, Data Validation. Select List for Allow, and for the source, select the cell containing the filter formula that you just created to get a list of the available sales agents. Now you want to get back all of the results that come from this formula, not just the one result that shows up in the reference cell. In other words, you want to include all of the values that spill out of this cell as well. So to include those values, enter the pound symbol at the end of the cell reference. Then you can click on OK. You now have a drop-down menu that filters out any values that have already been added once. How amazing is that? Well, that officially completes your Spreadsheet Life Excel Dropdown Masterclass. If you enjoyed this video and might reference it again in the future, I highly recommend that you bookmark this webpage. I also encourage you to subscribe so you don't miss any videos like this one. That being said, thank you for watching, and until next time, I will see you in the next Spreadsheet Life video.